Welcome to my Commodore 64 Games Memories. This is where I look at old games and some of the technical details behind them. Let's get into it. Today we have Nosferatu the Vampyre, released in 1986 by Piranha and copyright Macmillan. We're having a look at this game because there was a comment on one of my YouTube videos asking me if it's using plain high-res mode and if we could add some colour to it. So let's have a look at this. So yes, if you like these kind of technical deep dive videos, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel or sending me a super thanks. They are always very much appreciated. Looking at this in Commodore 64 debug GUI, we can see that it's just using a bitmap mode with the bitmap data at E000 and the color screen at CC00. There are no sprites enabled. In fact, the sprite graphics pointers don't really show anything which looks like valid sprite data at all. Even if I move around, we can see that there's no sprites being used. It's just the bitmap mode. Let's go into the other screen. Yep, even the spiders that move around are not sprites. They're not hardware sprites. They are software sprites. On the Commodore 64, we use the term software sprites when we're basically using the CPU to update the graphics data in memory, and that can be character-based graphics data, or it can be bitmap-based graphics data. And if we're updating information into like a grid of hardware sprites, if we're updating large amounts of graphics data into a grid of hardware sprites, then we might call this hybrid sprites. We might call it hardware and software sprites, or we might just call it software sprites if the sprite grid is static. For example, if the sprite grid is just displaying a static grid of information, and then that grid of information, the graphics data, is dynamically updated, then that of course would be more kind of like software sprites, but with a hardware overlay. Anyway, so let's open up the sprites view, although as I say, I don't think there were any sprites in this game at all being used. We do have something that looks a little bit like lightly structured data, don't we, in the sprites format there. But it's not completely in Commodore 64 sprite graphics data format. So there's the text screen for the color screen for the bitmap data. We'll leave the sprites view open for now, I think. Let's expand this area of memory so we can have a look at it in a little bit more detail. Yeah, it does look really quite structured, doesn't it? I think that's graphics data. Let's wander around with the player character. There's nothing else, right? That's the bitmap data. That's not important or interesting to us in the sprite graphics view. Oh look, it's changed in memory as I walk around. Sometimes the data in that memory alters. It seems to update some what looks like frames of graphics. Now, it's not hardware sprite data, but it's software sprite data. I'm pretty sure of it. Look, when I change, yeah, look, it's as I move the player character, it's calculating or updating more graphics in memory, probably on an as-needed basis, so that as the animation frame is needed, if it doesn't have the correct horizontal flip, I think, look, as I move the character, yeah, if I move the character northwest or up and to the left, and if I move it northeast or up and to the right, then it's basically using an X-flipped graphics. The graphics frames are X-flipped. And if I move down to the left and down to the right, then it's using X-flipped frames there. So if I toggle between, down left and down right, then it's basically dynamically flipping or updating the graphics data in those graphics frames there. So the software sprite data is not in the same format as the Commodore 64 hardware sprite data, but it looks like it was structured, right? So I'm pretty safe, I think, in assuming that that is some graphics data sitting somewhere in memory. But the question in the YouTube channel was basically asking if we could add some colorization to this. So if we want to add some colorization to this, we need to find out certain things. We need to find out where the objects are being drawn in the screen, and we need to find out the object's type, and we need to find out the object dimensions, and then we can try and translate the position and the size and the object type, and we can try and translate that into drawing into the color screen or bitmap. That's going to get rather difficult. So let's, first of all, we're on the title screen. We're going to fill the title screen with solid pixels. We're going to look at what stores data into where the bitmap screen is as we go from the title screen to the game. So we're using the watch point there between E000 and E100, which is the top few characters of the bitmap data. Let's change the bitmap graphics map view so that we're looking at the zoomed in single buffer bitmap screen there. This game is using a single buffer, it's not using double buffering, so it makes it easier for us to look for a watch point in a particular area in memory. This is the graphics map for the color screen. Don't forget that the high resolution bitmap has a color screen where the background and the pixel color can be changed in each 8x8 pixel character block. This looks like an optimized unrolled loop of clearing a large block of memory with 0, and that just clears the screen data, look, and it's clearing the bitmap data in one great big unrolled loop, indexed, X. So let's put a breakpoint at the end of that clear screen, and then let's reinstate the cleared pixel data in the bitmap, and let's just double check. Yeah, it's 1F40, so yes, we're filling the bitmap data. Actually, I think I'm filling 1 byte extra, right? It should be FF3F inclusively rather than exclusive, but never mind. Okay, well, I hope there's no important data at the end of the graphics data memory. Oh, well, we'll see. Okay, well, it's redrawn. So if you notice when it was redrawing in the graphics bitmap debug view, it was drawing from top right to bottom left, row-wise. So let's reinstate the ranged breakpoint again, and let's also fill, well, this is the end of the unrolled clear. So let's put a breakpoint at the end, I think, of the unrolled clear. That's the breakpoint there. Okay. It's not returning with an RTS, which is annoying. It's just going into a jump. So we'll reinstate now the ranged breakpoint. And we'll reinstate the ranged breakpoint for the whole of bitmap memory. Let's do that. And shall we fill the bitmap data with solid pixels? I think we probably should do. Let's make it 3F this time, rather than, so that we're just filling the bitmap data and not going over the last byte of the next piece of memory. Hopefully it's not important, but there we go. Okay, so let's do a ranged store breakpoint as well. Okay, look, it's stored 1 byte into the bitmap, and 1 byte corresponds to 8 bits, and that's 8 pixels. And look, it's clearing a row of pixels. That's an interesting way of, oh, look. So it's loading from 401, 402, 400 as well in hex. So it's loading for 400 in hex and storing row-wise pixels into the bitmap data. Okay, so it's storing 5 times 8, 40 pixels horizontally in one row. Look, it's doing an indirected jump there as well. This is using the CPU history command. We can see that the beginning of the draw for this block span draw has used an indirected jump. So it's using a jump table to go into this indirected jump, into this routine here. Looks like it's counting at 59 AE. Looks like the deck $38. It looks like 38 has the number of pixel rows. to draw before it exits this loop. Look, the graphics offset is maximum of 5 bytes each, okay, for this row. So it seems to be doing chunks of 5 bytes, which equates to 40 pixels, 40, because 5 times 8 is 40, right? Okay, cool. So this routine seems to be doing a lot. Okay, so the data stored in 400 in hex onwards, that block of memory there, is not in the same format as bitmap data. It looks like it's row-wise, horizontal-based data, horizontal pixel-based data, or byte-oriented data, and then it's de-swizzling it, if you like, and then storing it into the bitmap into this with this semi-unrolled loop there, which is all fine and dandy. That's a good way of doing it. If you want to optimize your draw routine. So it looks like it's calculating data into 400 in hex and then eventually rendering it into the bitmap. If we go back through the CPU history, look, we've got some load accumulators with 2A, Y, adding 2A, Y, 2A, blah, blah, blah. So 2A looks like it might be some kind of like object reference. So when I'm looking at code like this, my initial impressions are based on my experience, and my experience tells me that when you're using indirected, in brackets, Y addressing mode, it's usually because you're trying to read some kind of like structured data, indexed, Y. And when you have several of these and you have calculation involved, it tends to tell me that there's some kind of like object structure in memory that's being accessed, because you might be trying to read the X position, the Y position, add on and offset. This unrolled store loop here seems to be an optimized clear for the what seems to be composited data in the 400 in hex memory range there. So at the moment, look, it's cleared with 0, and it's got some 20 bytes in there, which is basically the graphics data from what was the text screen before. So this is the 400 in hex, if you remember, is the default text screen that the Commodore 64 uses for its basic ready prompt at power on, where you get the power on message and everything, the basic RAM bytes free and everything like that. So this tells me that there is some composited data at 400 in hex, and it's being rendered into the bitmap. This is useful information because now we can see what is storing into 400. So we found that unrolled clear loop there, and then the unrolled clear loop then goes into this subroutine here. What is this subroutine doing? Well, we'll have to try and figure it out, won't we? So the subroutine at 57AC, yeah, look, then it goes into this object. Oh, look, this is at 26 indirected, Y this time. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 indirected bytes with 26, Y. Oh, there's a 5th one there. Okay, that's the next one, right? What? Ooh. Okay, look. Oh, and then it gets into the draw span routine eventually. Ah, okay. Yeah, and then this. Oh, look. Load, store, load, store. Yeah, okay. So that's the span draw right into the bitmap, and then it exits from that span draw in the bitmap code. It's drawing horizontal spans from the top right. Each span seems to be 8 pixels tall. Okay. I really do think, when I look at this code, the structure of the code is telling me that I'm really strongly leaning towards thinking that 400 is like the composite buffer, because this is an isometric game and it's using software sprites. Usually you want your software sprites and your background draw and everything else to composite into a buffer, and then you can quickly update it into the visible bitmap screen without flicker, right? It makes sense to do it that way rather than trying to update into the bitmap screen without double buffering it, because you would get flicker, you get visible flicker. But just doing a store into the bitmap screen, you are much less likely to get flicker. especially if you're doing a bounding rectangle update. And because it's drawing, yeah, look, 38 comes from 58, and 58 might be calculated way up in the CPU history at this point. But yeah, so the horizontal pixel draw seems to be copying up to a variable number of pixel rows. And this variable number of pixel rows tells me that this routine, it strongly leans me into thinking that this routine is doing a rectangle copy. It looks like it's taking a variable number for a variable width of data, and it's reading that in from a jump table, and this is the jump table. So we've got some routine pointers here, is it? Let's have a look. 58C8, 58EE. I'm looking at this in high byte, low byte format, you see, or low byte, high byte format. So let's disassemble that. Yeah, look, see? Right, if we keep on disassembling, we can see that it was doing 1 byte, then 2 bytes, and this is 3 bytes of copying from the 400 composite array. This is doing 3 bytes there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bytes copy there. If we keep on disassembling now, that was the previous one, that's 4 bytes, but now look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 5 bytes of copying, and then there don't seem to be any more copy routines. So 5 bytes horizontally seems to be the maximum, but it's copying a variable number of pixel rows. Okay, so there's that clear of the composite buffer again, the unrolled clear. Then there's a draw. Okay, so it's drawing into the bitmap, it's clearing the composite buffer and drawing what we can obviously see is blank pixel data into the bitmap. Okay, so I'm guessing that there are no objects up at the top of the screen in the first 8 pixel rows of the screen. Okay, next row, I'm guessing, if I just run this code, right, I'm pretty sure that what we'll get is, let's look here in the top right hand corner of the screen, the next row down, way, there we go, it's a rectangle. Okay, so we have a rectangle draw. That routine was obviously doing a variable number of vertical pixel copies, right? So yeah, that's definitely a rectangle draw using the composited buffer. So we get a good idea about what the size of this composite buffer is now, right? And look, if you look at the graphics map for the text screen as well, you can see that there are more zeros stored into it. This graphics map debug view for the text screen data is showing the composite buffer, you see. That's what I set it up to show, and it's showing a load of ats, which, yeah. Oh, look, this routine here, by the way, where it's doing a load and or store is basically it's doing an and with a mask and a or with the pixel data. And this is a very obvious piece of code which updates software sprite data into the composite buffer. So it's reading what's in the composite buffer, anding it with a mask to remove previous pixels, and then ORing in new pixel data. And this new pixel data looks like this. So, and it's doing it for the $3.38 number of bytes as well in memory. So this is a variable height software sprite composite routine. Okay, and then it's going to draw this pixel data in the composite buffer into the bitmap data. So I bet now that the next rectangle that we draw will contain something in terms of visible graphics. So let's run it, and there we go. We've got a wall there now. Let's go to the next. Oh, look, there's the next watch breakpoint. And this routine here, where it's doing a load and or store, looks like a draw object routine. So this looks like a software sprite update where it's taking the source data in the compositing buffer, anding it with the mask for the bit pixel data mask, and then ORing in new pixel data, and then storing back into the compositing buffer. If we have a look through the CPU history, we can see some reading for jump table entry point for this draw into the compositing buffer routine. which then jumps through to indirected through to 001E. So let's see if we can go back to the calling routine. Hopefully it exits with an RTS at some point. Looks like it does. Just tracing through this code a little bit more. Just looking for an exit point. Look, it's doing 3 bytes there in an unrolled loop. Okay, there we go. It's come out and it goes back here. Then it jumps back to 5752. Again, we have a load indirected with load indirected $26, there. Looks like it's loading the object type and then an X and Y position, and it looks like the X and Y position goes into the X and Y registers, which is funny. I think that's what it looks like it's doing. Maybe. So the jump to 5752 goes back to the beginning of this routine, right? Seems to be going around in a loop, calling this composite draw routine. If we put a breakpoint here and then exit out, so we could just continue running. And there we go. We've got round to the next one in the list now, the next object load in the list. The accumulator seems to be type at this point anyway. That's what I'm betting it is. Because look, the accumulator is ANDed with 7F and then transferred to X, and then it's using X to load into these indirected tables. And the tables are separated by 80 in hex bytes, which is 128 in decimal objects. We seem to have the AND with 7F as well, limits the range of the number from 0 to 127 in decimal, or 0 to 7F in hex. Looks like this routine is reading in the data pointers for the graphics, perhaps, and then also it looks like it's reading in some width and height data from the type, and the graphics data offset, obviously. So that's all cool. I think, looking at this code, it looks like it's kind of relatively well understood. Let's put a breakpoint at 576B, I think, because that's the code that is running just before it returns from the interrupt, which is there. We can see in the CPU execution history the RTI instruction right there. That's a return from interrupt. So it looks like we're seeing the interrupt routine right there. So let's put a breakpoint at 576B. So then we can have a look at the CPU history in more detail. Yes, so we can see the previous software sprite composite being called there, where it's doing a load and or store. And then it does an RTS at the end of that. And then it jumps to 5752. 5752 then takes the low and high address in 26 and 27, and that is the object, indirected object address pointer, and it's loading it and it's adding it with 5. So yes, each object is 5 bytes long, and that's at least an X and a Y position, a couple of bytes, which I don't know what those are. They're not object type by the looks of it. Excuse me. So this is the start of the routine. Well, this is the start of the object draw code. These are screen objects, right? Looks like XPOS here. That's my initial guess. Looks like it's comparing it with FF as well. So if the X position is FF, which is -1 in decimal, then it looks like it's skipping over that object, so maybe that's like a combined object alive flag or something like that. Maybe objects don't go off the left or right hand side of the screen. Screen objects, that is. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, 579F definitely looks like the type load. Need to remember these memory addresses, I think, because these are going to be important, because to colorize the screen, to recap, to colorize the screen, we need X and Y position on the screen. we need width and height of the rectangle to colorize, and we need a color. So we can get the object, we can derive the object color from the type. We can just kind of like map the type of the object to a specific color. We could put the color in an object, but that's interesting, stepping through this. We can put the color in an object table, or in a color table, but we're not going to do that, I don't think. But anyway, yeah, it looks like sometimes it's reading an on-screen object, but it's not always hitting the object draw for the composite routine, and it's not always hitting the dirty rectangle. And that's because the object is outside of the dirty rectangle, or the rectangular area on the screen, which is being updated. So that tells us that this object list is like the screen visible object list, screen object list, but it's not always getting to the draw routine, which is what you would expect, right? Objects outside of the dirty rectangle should not get drawn. And it looks like most of the objects are 2 characters wide, but not always. There's that optimized composite buffer screen clear. There's the next object draw. I wonder what those other 2 bytes are after the X and Y position. So we have the type load, and then we have the routine for ECB. And the routine for ECB, don't forget, loads from the object type into these tables here. Okay. One of them is definitely the height in pixels, which I think is the store to 38. And we have the width in bytes, which is the load at 4EE3. I think that's what we're seeing there. And the load and the byte row length also has the high bit set as well for whether or not it's X flipped. I'm pretty sure that's what that code's doing there, because it's shifting it left and then shifting it right, and that extracts the top bit. At this point now, just to recap, we know what we think of the X position, the screen Y position, the width in terms of bytes, and height and type. So we can use this to now colorize, or try to colorize the screen. We can write some code and inject it into the game, and then we can see what we get. These are my debug notes, so we know where the row copy is for the bitmap data update. We know where the object reading routine is. We know where we think the XY width and height and type. Looking at the debug text screen view here, we've got some blank memory where we can put this code. So this code will live at 640 in hex, which is this blank area in the text screen there. We hook into those routines that we identified, and then we replace those instructions and those routines with some jumps. And they jump into these routines here, and these extract the X position, the Y position, the pixel's width, and the pixel's height, or rather the byte's width, I think. And then the last hook is in the draw routine there for the indirected jump through to the scan buffer draw. I think that's where we'll put it anyway. The main draw loop, once it converts the coordinates for what we get from the game, and the width and height and everything, it just basically draws characters and stores color into the color screen, which is used for the bitmap data. So we should see this data stored into the color screen there. So let's load the snapshot. Let's assemble the code using command line. First, we need to get into the right working directory. There we go. We'll use Acme assembler to assemble the code. Now we need to use this command in the monitor debug window to actually load the code into memory. So loading the assembled code into memory will load it into the position where we want to, which is at 640 in hex, which is where the start address of the code is. Okay, then we should see that code load in the debug graphics map view, like that. There we go. Then we run the code, go 640, right? And once we go 640, we can see the disassembly of the code. That's our new code. Go 640 should then return back to the title screen. Now we're back in the title screen loop, and we can hit go, and there we go. The colorization code has run. So basically, the object type for the walls and the door and those objects anyway turn out to to be light blue. And we can see now that the color screen has those extra bytes drawn into it. I'm not too sure what those brown and tan things are down there. They might be other objects which are hidden, which are behind us, or I might have got the coordinates a bit wrong. I'm not entirely sure that I've got the coordinates entirely correct there. But at least for the code, for a first pass of the code, this is relatively a good attempt. So we could see what this game could do to try and colorize the bitmap view. The thing is that it's a high resolution bitmap, so you only have a choice of 2 colors per 8x8 character cell. Unless the graphics have been specifically designed to mask out the character cell boundaries, then you're going to get these character cell jaggedy lines and stuff like that. So it's going to be difficult to colorize from code. I think it would need like a hand optimization to do the colorization a bit better, to be honest. But this is what you could do with code, is that you could inject code into the game to basically use the information that we get from disassembling the game and reverse engineering it, and then get the game to self-colorize its bitmap view. As I say, I think it needs some improvement, but as a first pass of that kind of like colorization code, it's not too bad of an attempt, right? I think there are probably better ways of doing it, and it would need some research, further research, to be able to improve that. But let's clear the color screen before we go through the door. So we'll clear the color screen with 10, which is basically white pixels. Actually, we need to fill the whole screen. There we go. Let's go through the door now. And yeah, the next view it's colorized differently, so at least we know that it's picking up some objects and colorizing it, but I think the object coordinates are not entirely correct. I think we'll leave that video there. So thank you very much for asking the question about whether or not we could colorize it. I think we probably can do, just needs more work. Thank you very much for watching these crazy retro games videos. If you do like this kind of stuff, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel. And I hope to catch you around next time. Take care, have a great day, evening or night, wherever you are.